And I ignored all of the things that were catalysts for long-term performance, including appropriate fueling of that training, enough recovery, and I ended up with chronic fatigue.
Hello and welcome back to Fuel In Sessions. I'm your host, Scott Tindal, and today I have a very special guest and also someone I consider a very special friend. He is an expert. That's probably the easiest way to describe him. An expert in every sense. He's laughing. But look, Matt Dixon, welcome to Fuel In Sessions, because it's always been the reverse. You've always had me on the Purple Patch podcast. And so I feel incredibly grateful that you've joined me today to share your words of wisdom to our listeners about your experiences of nutrition across the ages, because you are old.
I'm old.
And I think this is going to be a great chat. A lot of learnings from, as we call you, a master coach. And so, Matty, without further ado, welcome to Fuel In Sessions, and thank you for joining me today.
Thanks, Scott. And I spent the morning looking around. I asked our coaching team. I asked my EA. I was like, "Where have you seen that invitation?" And now here I am. So I finally receive it, and I'm delighted to be here, I should say.
Very good, very good, mate. Look, this one is. It's going to be a chat, and I think what's really important for everyone to get their heads around is it's going to be a chat discussing nutrition in its current state, but also going back to when you first started as an athlete, but also as a coach, and your learnings with nutrition, because I think the learnings are really important, and the changes that have occurred across the sport are very important for athletes to hear, because fortunately or unfortunately, a lot of things go in cycles. And I think we should be able to learn from our past. But unfortunately, in human behavior, that's not often the case. And the mistakes tend to rear their head again and again and again. So, if there's anything that we can take from today, it's hopefully those lessons learned that won't be repeated in the future. So I think let's just get straight into it. Mate, you were an athlete. Well, you're still an athlete, I'll consider you an athlete. But do you want to just give a little bit of background of like what sort of level of athlete you were and what you were doing at the time from an athletic perspective, and then we'll get into what nutrition looked like at that point in time.
Sure. Well, my accent doesn't give it away, but I am American, but I'm also English. I'm 50-50, and I came over here as a swimmer, actually. So I swam in university over here. That was my background, swimming, which I was an Olympic trials finalist twice. So I missed the Olympic team in 92, 96. So there's my aging for you. Got to swim at a high level over here, of course, and feeding nutrition straight into the bio, by the way. We were swimming when I swam in college over here. I was at a pretty high volume program in the Midwest, a lot of more threshold every day type thing. And I remember the first year that we were allowed to have water bottles of any sort on the deck was in my fourth year, my senior year. So the first 3 years, we were swimming between 24 and 27 hours a week of training. We weren't even allowed to have hydration, let alone fueling during the session. So that was very much an afterthought there. But then my background educationally is a clinical physiologist. And when I was doing my master's degree, I found this sport of triathlon by accident as a bet, and went on to compete at a high level amateur, but then race professionally for several years. And I'm probably a great example of how to do a professional career very poorly. I had a high work ethic. I certainly, with some help of some very bad coaching, loaded up a massive amount of training volume. I was a pretty big volume athlete. And I ignored all of the things that were catalysts for long-term performance, including appropriate fueling of that training, enough recovery, et cetera, and I ended up with chronic fatigue. So my relationship with fueling as an athlete and nutrition as an athlete, I lived it personally. It was my undoing. It was the catalyst, actually, I would say, of not just my for lack of a better phrase, failure as an athlete, where I had an underwhelming pro career relative to, I think, my potential. And I never would have been a world champion or anything like that. I was a next level down from that, but I certainly didn't perform up to my potential. But in honesty, it was the catalyst of the ignition of the coaching methodology and belief system that has served us very, very well over the years of all levels of athletes. Obviously, our pros that did very well, but also time-starved, busy people that were just looking to perform in life as well.
No, I love it. Go back 92. So obviously quite a long time ago. I think I was in year 7. Still old. I mean, I talk to people today and they're like, what? And you finished school in what year? And I'm like, oh, my God, you were only born just, after that. Anyway, you mentioned like this water bottle on the edge of the pool. And do you know what? I hear this so often. Swim coaches and coaches are like, don't you dare have a water bottle on the edge of the pool because you don't get it during the race. And it's like, can you talk me through like what is the mindset there of a coach doing that?
So I think in our case, we weren't allowed to get out of the pool to go for a pee. It was only if you needed number 2. So they didn't want to pee in the pool too much, so they just stopped us drinking water or Gatorade. I think it was literally that. We still very much enjoyed peeing in the pool, as most swimmers do. But it really wasn't an afterthought. It was still, swimming at the time. Swimming is a sport that's gone over a massive evolution, and the performance levels nowadays are so much better than, bearing in mind, and I'll just give you the sort of barometer. I was finalist at Olympic trials, but the top female athletes I was a 400 IM, a 200 breaststroker, etc. And the women that are winning Olympic golds are faster than I was in the mid 90s. I mean, that's pretty amazing in events that are lasting 2 to 4 minutes. So the sport has gone through massive evolution, but when I was participating in it, it was about more, and things like supporting with proper nutrition, hydrating, understanding the impairment of chronic dehydration over time. There was never a discussion on it. So I think during the session, even that's not great for performance, swimming 2.5 hours without any hydration. But there wasn't even any coaching or education to say, before you come back this afternoon and do another 2 hours, why don't you hydrate a little bit? We didn't even have that type of education. It was just, be tough. You got to show up every day, and almost like Rocky Balboa, work harder. And we as a team, I think, were extremely fit, but always fatigued. And whenever I get together with my old college friends, we share stories of why we didn't perform. And it was everybody's fault but our own, of course. So you guys...
Let's stay on the swimming. I think actually the way I'm seeing this unfold is let's go swim, bike, run. Let's just do that and then go through that. So you mentioned you were always fatigued. Were you, a lot of you, sick? Did you get injuries?
We didn't get many injuries. Now it's a non-weight bearing sport. Sure. Pretty much 90% of your weight is displaced in the water. But we had the classic sort of overused stuff in the shoulders when you're swimming 25 plus hours a week. It is amazing actually how resilient we were. And a part of that is we were 18, 19, 20 years of age. We would have collapsed if we were 10 years older, for sure. I think a lot of the team was smarter than me and self-regulated better. I was one of those athletes that always wanted to please the coach. So I was one of the harder workers. I never self-regulated. I didn't have in many ways the confidence to as an athlete. And I really saw that when I started to coach pro athletes. One of the things I always remember saying to Kelly, my wife, is, coaching some of these, I was lucky. I'd coached world champion professional triathletes. And I said, one of the things they're so much smarter than I was as an athlete is they would self-manage and self-regulate so much better. I would just loyally do what I was told to do. And so I was a blunt hammer. But one of my, and I think it was my undoing ultimately, where I ultimately had systemic collapse, was that I was actually, from a musculoskeletal standpoint, really resilient. I never got injured. Even when I went into triathlon, I went into running, and I went from 0 miles a week to running 60, 70, 80 miles a week. I never got injured. What happened to me, because of under recovery, going too hard too often, ramping up to high volume too quickly, never doing easy days, and then certainly under fueling, because I'm a bigger guy, in pounds for the US audience. I was racing at about 190 pounds, so I was the biggest pro there was out there pretty much. There was one other guy that was around my size. Most of them were 30, 40 pounds, 10, 15, 20 kilograms lighter. I was always being driven while absorbing this training load to get to race weight, get lighter, lighter, lighter. So I had a pretty poor relationship with fueling and eating enough to support, because I was driven, coached to get lighter, lighter, lighter. So what happened to me is I systemically collapsed. I ended up with whatever it was, some form of physiological burnout, chronic fatigue, where I simply couldn't exercise. I just became a really blunt sword. I had nothing. I had no capacity.
I mean, in 92, around that early 90s, I mean, again, it's this notion, isn't it? Like, I think a lot of athletes are much better educated these days on low energy availability, LEA, REDS, relative energy deficiency in sport. Unbeknown to a lot of athletes, though, because it's very prevalent in social media today, is that REDS itself was only formed in 2015 as an acronym. Okay, we've had 10 years of that, but even then it was poorly sort of defined. Low energy availability used to be called the female athlete triad. So I'm sure you probably had females, and even then it was just poorly understood. Like, you were getting told you had chronic fatigue and whatnot, but probably the reality is, based on what I'm hearing, is that you were just, as you say, you were probably completely under fueling. You had low energy availability. You were then being pushed into this, syndrome of relative energy deficiency, and it impacted various physiological and performance parameters, at which, you look back, I'm sure you look back now and go, oh God, it all makes sense. You can look at these pretty infographics, showing how low energy availability impacts all these physiological parameters of the body, and go, oh yeah, I get it.
Well, I mean, to your point, and the way it expressed itself outside of overtly really poor performance and poor mood and everything else, was you go and look at my blood at the time, and I had the testosterone of a 4-year-old boy. I had a terrible ferritin level, every profile that we now more commonly accept. But here's the important thing, and this is fast forwarding to when I started to coach. And when I coached triathletes, I coached swimmers for several years. But when I moved into triathlon coaching post my professional career, I really wanted to help my athletes not make the same mistakes that I had made. And I think it's important. I think this is really important for the listener to understand. Fast forward. So this is now early 2000s. It's not that long ago. It's pretty long ago for some people, but it's not that long ago. And at that time, the methodology that we got known for, and that I got labeled as the nickname of the recovery coach, not in a positive way. Okay. And the reason for that is I said, and this was, I don't want to overblow it and say revolutionary, but it was so counter to the culture of sports at the time that was more. We're talking about triathlon, Ironman triathlon. And I said, these 4 components have equal importance in an athlete journey. Number 1, you've got to train really hard, swim, bike, and run. Number 2, you have to intentionally recover to facilitate that training. Number 3, every athlete should be doing year-round strength, at which time, by the way, almost zero endurance athletes were doing any strength training. I had many articles written about Purple Patch saying, what a joke, what a waste of time. You just need to do hill reps. Strength and conditioning is a waste of time. Our athletes did it year round. And thirdly, you want real focus on supporting whatever training you're doing with enough calories. I want every athlete to do post-workout fueling, became a huge thing. And I want athletes to hydrate during and between sessions really basic stuff. Yeah. So everything you say there, you'd like, yeah. At the time, it was like, no, that's just a quick fix. It was, it was so counter to the time. It was so things like nutrition, these acronyms of what we understand now. I always said the two biggest mistakes that athletes make globally is number one, not going easy enough in easy sessions, and number two, not consuming enough calories to support their training. By the way, I still think that's pretty true, but we are way ahead of the game relative to what we were then. And I mean, we went through a pandemic. We had a performance pandemic in the 90s and 2000s of many, many athletes consistently in a fog of fatigue because of this stuff. And I was lucky. I was one of the people that helped this catalyst when a paradigm shift was ready. And so nowadays, there's a whole industry built on recovery. But at that time, it was viewed as a sign of weakness. And
no, if you got the recovery coach mantle now, you're probably winning, because people are thinking, oh, that's fantastic. He's actually taking care of me and thinking of me. But yeah, I can see at the time it was probably, especially in the late 90s, early 2000s, it was probably, as you say, more is better. And
yeah,
I mean, it's interesting though, isn't it? Because now I think we're probably going full circle and talk about mistakes made. I think training is still so important. And that training stimulus, like now, like obviously we're in the nutrition business, like we fuel in and fueling everyone appropriately, correctly, making sure things like low energy availability and REDs don't exist. But on the flip side of that, I think sometimes it can go too far the other side. And, I'll talk to some of the pros and they're like, oh God, like, come on, like, yes, you can do a session fasted, or yes, you don't need to smash 90 or 120 grams every time. And it's got to be relative to you.
yeah,
And I think the training still has to occur. Like, just because you're eating really well, and I think this is the misnomer, the big elephant in the room, you can take 90 to 120 grams an hour. It doesn't make you a better athlete. It does not make you a better athlete. Like, the training makes you a better athlete. The nutrition is there to support the training stimulus. And that is just so often lost now. It's like, well, maybe if I just eat all these carbs, I'm going to become really quick. It's like, nah, sorry, buddy. It doesn't work that way. You still got to do the work.
It's not a super shoot. And by the way, it's exactly the same with recovery. Just because you're really good recovery doesn't make you faster. Whether you're trying to
sleep 9 hours.
Exactly. Great. Look, there is no shortcut to success in anything. There is no easy path. There is no hack. There is no, that's fact. Okay. You have to train. I've never had an athlete say, you know what, I don't want you to coach me anymore because it's just too easy. I'm not an easy coach, or I deliver a lot of work. But what are we trying to do with that training? We are delivering a stimulus that is a stress that will force adaptations that makes you fitter, stronger, more powerful, have lasting stamina, et cetera, et cetera. So a whole bunch of stuff that occurs. You're providing a stress to get fitter, stronger, more powerful. Great. The fuel, the recovery, the sleep is the catalyst to make that happen. But at the start of it is training really, really hard, consistently over many, many months, in fact, many, many years. And that's how people continue to evolve, building up your performance recipe, pardoning the pun.
Yeah, 100%. And I think it's the hard work and it's the hard things we do that bring the results. And I will always say, like, if it's really easy, probably the end result's not going to be that great.
Yeah, exactly.
However, a lot of people, I think it's still, that message is somewhere in between at the moment. I think things getting a little bit confused, and maybe some of those lessons of the past where I think, like you said, like, I mean, God, what were you really good at? You said with your swimming group, you were resilient bastards, and I'm sure you were tough as hell, because like you were under immense pressure, probably too much. But I think there is advantages in doing that as well. Like, I think back to, when we did with rugby and things like that, like, the sessions that were brutal made you a stronger athlete, but also a stronger cohesive group, because you did tough things together.
Well, just because you embrace recovery as a tool to get faster and you value it's important doesn't mean that you should recover every time you get tired. It doesn't mean you should be fearful of suffering. That's important. It is challenging. It should be hard. Sometimes you do need to push through. It's creating the program that you can, once you have gone through that suffering, bounce back and be back in the game quickly. And you can derive all of the adaptations that you want. So there is a mental game of that. I'll add as well, what I feel like there is with everything, whether it's technology, whether it is all of the different systems of recovery, whether it's nutrition, hydration, everything else, there is a continual pull of athletes of all levels to overcomplicate and focus on the things at the periphery and the things that maybe make some incremental element, but so often have not actually put the fundamentals in place. So, Scott, you and I have talked about this the whole time. Somebody probably comes to Fuel In and they want to have the magic program to get the right fueling right, et cetera, whether they're looking to shift their body composition or improve their sports performance. But when you take a step back and you look at them, they're not sleeping well and they don't have good habits in there. They're overtraining with either too much load, too much intensity, not enough recovery infused into it. And it's not that no matter what we do with nutrition, it's not going to help, but getting some really basic practices. And what I always say, get your boulders sorted out first before you obsess about the sand. That gets you 95% of the way there. That was actually a mantra that we had with our Purple Patch Pros, is nail the basics. These are 7 basic habits that every single athlete needs to do if you're going to be a member of our squad. Really simple stuff. Get that, you're 95% of the way there. Then you have the luxury to layer on the complexity, whether it's complexity of technology, whether it's complexity of supplements, whether it's complexity of compression boots, whatever it might be. You get that after you've focused on the basics.
Look, and I know we're jumping around a little bit, but just diving into that, I think, like you talk about, people come on Fuel In at the start and they're so hell-bent on the gram. Oh, the tracking, I scanned the barcode and it's not exactly the same as what's on the back. And I'm like, yeah, I mean, we had an example of this the other day. It was a lady and she's, it's completely inaccurate. And I was like, well, let's have a look. And it was out by 1 gram of protein, 2 grams of fat, and 3 grams of carbs. And I'm like, yeah, I'm just going to say, like, I don't think that really matters in the scheme of things. And it's like, yeah, but it's inaccurate. And I'm like, yeah, but look at the big picture here. Sort out your boulders. Like, okay, you're eating that. Great. The label could be out by 1, 2, and 3 grams anyway, because what's on the back of a label is not gospel. I hate to break it to everyone, but what's on the back of a nutrition label may not be accurate. Okay.
It's an
so
estimate.
that's the first part about food tracking that everyone needs to understand. So, okay, we're a little bit out there. Maybe if it's you logging something, you didn't quite weigh it exactly. You said 80 grams, maybe it was 85 grams. It doesn't really matter. But when you step back and you look at what we're trying to do, we're trying to educate you on the targets of protein, the targets of fat, the targets of carbohydrates, the timing of those. How does that relate to the training load that you're doing? Get within the target. You're going to do so much better than 95% of people.
Yeah.
But focus on what needs to be focused on. Yes, if you're pushing for world championship, okay, the grams down to that may matter, okay, when we're talking at that level. Mm-hmm. But for majority of athletes, we're not talking that. Like it's just not that level of data. And that's probably, again, a really good reason why we set up Fuel In as targets. It's not absolutes. You're not targeting 31 grams. I see this in other apps. You talk about creating mental health issues.
Yeah.
Well, we're going to give you 32 grams of carbs that you've got to target. Like, don't do that. Somewhere between 30 and 50 grams is going to be fine.
And I would argue like that example is a great example that can be transferred to many things in sport. It's one of the challenges of GPS on the run or power meters on the bike, which are really valuable tools because they provide you with live and post-session feedback over your output or internal cost, heart rate monitors, obviously. But it is a natural challenge of people thinking that precision is the same word as specificity, and I need to ride at 225 watts. It's like, hang on, we are dealing with something that is physiology. This is a dirty, chaotic thing that is influenced by all sorts of stressors, internal and external. And your magical FTP or number that you've used to derive these highly precise training zones is variable any given day, depending on your state of hydration, fatigue, and everything else. It is a guide. And that is the same basically with everything. And I think listeners would be really surprised, actually, if you lined up all of the greats in endurance sport. If you take and you go through, and you list them out, male and female, and you take the top 50, people would be stunned at how simple and repeatable, and I hate to use the word, but I use it in a really positive way, mundane, their practices and habits are. And that they are not, for the most part, actually trying to ride at a watt. They are not. They are the ones that develop a sense of great awareness, feeling, etc. And you have some of the best athletes in the world. You have two of them on staff. You have Daniela and Jan. I guarantee if you just have discussions with them, they are two of the best athletes in the sport ever, if not the best male and female athletes in the sport ever. I guarantee you they have a great sense of feeling, and they just make smart, pragmatic decisions and would hit targets. And it's stunning to me that then amateur athletes doing it for joy and satisfaction and pride and everything else feel like they need to create a cage around themselves in every arena. It becomes paralyzing and performance declining, unfortunately, I would argue.
I mean, yeah, so much to unpack there. I mean, Daniela, honestly, the first time I remember when I was chatting to her, and she's like, no, I didn't wear a heart rate monitor or have a power meter in any of her world championship wins.
Yeah.
And she didn't train with that, but she just had a great feel for it. Now, I'm not saying that you shouldn't have heart rate monitor. I'm not saying you shouldn't have a power meter, but I think there are times where if you are using those tools, use them not to be precise, but to be in a range. I will give you one example of technology. I know, again, probably jumping all over the place, but there is a device actually, which I do really enjoy. I don't necessarily think the setup is great and it's a bit clunky and things. It's a thing called the Moxie. I don't know if you've ever played around with it, but what I do love about it is it's giving an estimation, of that oxygen saturation.
Yeah.
And it provides you with that range because, and what I find fascinating with it, and I was playing around with it because, can it help me understand my zones and how hard to push within the zone, which as you will, say your zone 2 might be, 170 to 220. Some days 170 feels like it's like brutal and you're working super hard. Other days 220 might feel super easy. What's really interesting with this device is that it allows you to see how well, you are actually performing from a physiological standpoint and where that sits in that range. And, does that help you potentially? Where I was sort of playing with it was, can that help you then understand being in the range or the zone you want to then manage the fueling correctly around that, not overshooting, not undershooting, but just being in that range. So I do like that device. I think it's something, I talked to Phil Batterson, who is involved in the company, Dr. Phil Batterson, and I think from a technical standpoint, it's got a lot of work to do, but I think what it could provide to an athlete, I think it can nearly relax them in that you don't have to be so, like you said, that 205, I have to ride at 205, and it's like, no, you don't.
I've been having a lot of discussions with Simon Whitfield, who is a legend, first Olympic gold medalist.
Good Knox boy, mate. I went to school with him.
He's good. He's a good guy, and Simon's terrific, but he's involved in a company that's very, very similar technology to Moxie, and I've been having several discussions with them. Something like that is additive. We're coming back to just globally, whether it's that technology, we call it power meters, pace, etc. Dr. Stephen Seiler is a great, he's
Mm-hmm.
American, but he's based in Scandinavia, great physiologist. His
Yep.
explanation of how to best leverage that, and this is one of the leading sports physiologists in the world, done a lot of work with cross-country skiers. I find it the best for an athlete to start to build a positive relationship with this stuff. He always talks about you are flying the plane as the athlete. And all this technology, all this metric and information, it's your heads up display. So it is not pass fail. It is not a rigid thing. You are still flying. You're still looking. Your heads are up there, and you're looking out at the terrain, looking what you're doing, managing your internal costs. This is just giving you information. That's a very different thing than the power meter. Daddy is telling me I'm this, and it's pass fail, good or bad. That's the worst way to leverage this. I know we're way off of fueling and nutrition on this,
But it all
but it's
relates, Matty, because
yeah,
then people like, it's like these numbers around nutrition. And I think this is the thing when that athlete and they finally probably the hardest thing we struggle with fueling is obviously we have different tiers. You have your autopilot, you have co-pilot, and you have one-to-one. Co-pilot and premium obviously have the benefit of talking to a human being. And nutrition is one of those disciplines within your four sort of pillars at Purple Patch that it is a very personal pillar.
yeah,
Like everyone has their individual nuances. Yes, we can layer in the really sound principles of top quality, science proven performance nutrition. Yet we still acknowledge as practitioners that everyone has their little nuances and needs to discuss what works for them. Probably a little bit like training. I mean, at the end of the day, you can have a training program, just go at it yourself, or you can have some coaches actually talking you through it and helping you with exactly like we have discussed today. Hey, yeah, we might be saying 205, but you don't have to be at 205. You can be at 195 or 215. It's still going to be fine. Oh, okay. I didn't understand that. And I think the battle we face with Fuel In is exactly this. Obviously, we have targets. We have rings, protein, fat, carbs, calories, and people love to try and get all that right. And that's part of it. It's a little bit of a gamified, I guess, in that sense. But I think it's talking them through and talking them off the ledge sometimes of like, you don't need to be that exact. But if you can be consistent with what you're doing on a daily, weekly, monthly, yearly basis, take the time to explore, take the time to learn it, then you'll get the results. It's just the unfortunate that, it doesn't work. It doesn't work for me. Oh, I can't do this. I'll go to the next thing. It's like the next thing is probably going to be pretty similar.
Yep.
Like we're still talking protein, fat, and carbs and calories. And like, whatever is going to work for you is going to work for you. But all I would urge individuals and athletes is just take a step back, think about, and it's something you've taught me as well, and you talk about, and it really resonates with me. It's like, these are habits for life.
Yep.
Habits for life. Training is not just about the next race. It's actually about being healthy. It's about being strong. It's about being fit. It's about having a good mental state. Food is not about getting a six-pack, okay? It might be about getting to an optimal body weight for a health perspective. Yes, if you are fat and carry excessive body fat, you are more at risk of disease, of chronic diseases. Like, again, fact, I'd love someone to argue that with me, because unfortunately there is a lot of data to show that obesity and being overweight is going to contribute to a higher risk of those non-communicable type diseases, heart disease, dementia, you name it. So like, that is really important. These habits, it's not about the next race. It's actually thinking, you talk about, how much you live in California. Longevity, fuck. Everyone talks about longevity. It's like, why don't you train and exercise? Why don't you move more? Why don't you eat really well? Why don't you sleep a little bit more? And why don't you surround yourself with friends?
Exactly.
Like it's not that hard, but just take the time to allow yourself to do it. And I know I'm
Exactly.
preaching here, but far out, I have to repeat myself over and over again with individuals to try and get that light bulb moment where it's like, oh yeah, okay, this is about the rest of my life. It's not about the next 8 weeks.
Well, I'm going to join something that's very purple patch and something that's very fueling, and I'm going to try and wrap it up for what you just said there. Okay, on the purple patch side, the driving belief that has been, if I want an athlete to become world champion, if I want an athlete to qualify to Kona, if I want an athlete to cross the finish line of a triathlon, if I want an athlete to develop consistency and really add this sport into life and amplify, it all sits on a platform of health first. They must be healthy. The fueling side is something that you taught me, which is when it comes to thinking about fueling all of those endeavors, the first thing you put into place is really great foundational eating habits for a platform of health, life, vibrancy. And once you have those never change. What you layer on top and throttle in a way is your fueling demands. And those two components really meld together to define, I think, what it means to be a successful athlete, where you're really busy and time starved, whether you're trying to be a world champion. Build a platform of health and then be it consistently and train the specific demands relative to your level. Build a platform of really robust, great eating habits to fuel your longevity, your health, your quality of life, your cognitive function, disease prevention, and then throttle it up and down with your fueling. I think that is the golden mindset that any athlete of any level can take through them to life.
100%, mate. 100%. Constantly saying a healthy athlete is a high performing athlete. And I think you've only got to look at social media at the moment. And like you can see, look at Lionel. Lionel's a great example. High performing. Is he healthy? No. Like, having dealt with him, poor eating habits. Is he trying to do something about it? Yes, I think he is, and that's great. I don't know. Look, I've had dealings with him. I don't work with him now or anything like that. But, eating habits, he's been self-described. He eats a lot of junk food. Does he do strength work? No, he just put a post up the other day. I'm going to do strength work for the first time in his career. And I'm reading that and I'm going, wow, like, imagine if you'd done strength work over your career, how much more potentially resilient your body could be. The potential, and we understand this from strength training, is that it will reduce the risk of injury. It's not going to prevent injuries, but it can reduce the risk.
And it boosts performance.
And then it can boost performance. You talk about your swimming. Did you get any injuries? No, you may not have got injuries, but long term, I'd love to see like bone mineral density in those swimmers.
Yeah. Yep.
That has an impact 10 to 15 to 20 years later down the line.
Yep.
Swimmers nowadays lifting weights, great, because they understand the importance for their bone mineral density and also their strength and their power in the water.
And their performance,
So it's like it's getting that balance between what is good for your health and then good for performance. And it's a very complicated web, isn't it?
It is. I guiding the conversation back a little bit that I think I don't want to finish without mentioning, because I think it's important, is we've talked about the seas of change that occur over the years, and we went all the way back to my middling swimming career and the lack of hydration, and then me not fueling, etc. As a coach, it is not so many years ago. I've stepped back from coaching professional athletes now. When you do it for 15 years, it's like having 15 teenagers at a time for 15 years. I've served my time, and they're all highly additive to my life. But it is not so many years ago that the way that we met, way before fueling, by the way, and way before you're really a part of triathlon by any meaning, like everybody knows you. You are the guy in triathlon for nutrition and fueling. And this is way before your background in other professional sports, rowing, rugby, professional hockey, ice hockey, and the list goes on. But you came in to help one of my athletes, Sarah Piampiano, many listeners will know her, someone who, by the way, is not genetically, physically, radically gifted by any stretch. Whether we're talking about VO2 max, explosion, power, mobility, she ranks in the thin air of world performance. She always ranked very, very low, but she overcame that and beat many of her peers and became one of the best triathletes in really in the history of the sport. Very, very successful, multiple Ironman champion. The last 2 or 3 years of her career, I remember you working with her, and it was unbelievable to me what you were suggesting her to do, both in terms of fueling her training. This is coming from a coach that really pushed heavy fueling for training and fueling in racing. And what you were suggesting to her, I found mind-boggling. And I was just like, you can't absorb that, particularly in racing. And there was no one out there fueling races in an Ironman at 80, 90, 100 grams. And you were suggesting that at that time. No one was doing the sport, and you were coming in as a proverbial outsider. It's funny because now many listeners will think that's just commonplace, but this was only 7 years ago, really, something like that. It's in this last 8 years that there has been this sea change. And I don't think many listeners realize that you're one of the big catalysts, with others, of course, always, the same as it goes back to my time with recovery and those components, of driving this paradigm shift that has had a huge performance impact on endurance athletes of all levels, I would say. It's pretty amazing.
Yeah, look, it's fun to be part of it, I think, because ultimately it is driving, better health and better performance, when it's done correctly. So, but mate, credit to you. I mean, as we've talked about in the past, like, you gave me the shot to do it, and it was a gamble because I hadn't worked with endurance athletes. Like, it was always intermittent sport and power athletes and things like that. But
it wasn't easy as well. I was a bit of a bastard.
You were a bit of a prick, but it was all right. You know what's funny though, and actually I found this out. So talking to Daniela, she was doing this.
She was,
but she didn't talk about it. She didn't. So no one knew what she was doing. But she had in her bottles, she had 140, 150 grams of carbs, in her bottles in Kona. And, like, when she didn't do it properly, she's talked about that when she did the sparkling water on the run and, they lost her legs and then was overtaken. It's like she saw the value in fueling correctly. And and proof is in the pudding. I mean, she was doing it before anyone else. It's like having that chat with Jan. I did that podcast the other day, and I definitely encourage people to listen to it. He's 70.3 fueling, and he's like, I had the secret weapon. And I was like, what's that? And he's like, I had a gel for the run. And I'm like, what? And he's like, actually, I had 2 gels for the run ready to go because no one was doing that. And that was, 2017? Am I right? 2017? South Africa?
I remember, 2016, 17. I remember Jan Frodeno's first world championship. I think Jan was one of them there. I'm pretty sure he was. But there was a year, it was probably 2013. The world championship was in Vegas.
Okay.
I was coaching, it might have been before this actually, but I was still coaching Chris Lieto, who had got second. Craig Alexander was the guy I think that won it that year. Sebastian Kienle was just coming through. So you had these 70.3 and Ironman specialists racing. We had several athletes in the race. I think we had Tim Reed, who was 4th or 5th. I think Chris was 2nd or 3rd that year. But there was a wave of short course athletes that arrived, and they were going to clean up in this sport, and it was the Jan Frodenos of the world, and these and several other very, very fast runners. And I think universally in that first year, they all got undone. And none of them were used to the fueling, and still a lot of the long course athletes were way under fueling relative to what they should do. But at least they consumed some gels, and it was really the bike was very, very demanding. It was a tough course, and the 70.3 athlete specialists made it really hard. That was actually a tactic we leveraged. We are going to make the bike ride hard. They all came off the bike together, and none of them had running legs. And I think a part of that was substrate. They just didn't have the calories in the body.
Yeah, I mean, you've only got to listen again. Anything you hear Jan talk about from that Olympic transition to 70.3 to
Yeah.
Ironman, and the joy was he could actually eat something.
He could
Now,
actually
was he eating enough? No, and he admits that now. Like he's like, I mean, it was only in that final year where we got to work together. He's like, holy hell, this is a lot of carbs and this is a lot of calories, but it was like, gee, it has a positive impact. And it's like,
I tell you what, he's a great champion as well because he had that experience, but he worked it out.
yeah,
He did work
I
it
mean,
out.
that's what he said. If you
Mm.
don't evolve, you die. You know,
Yeah,
you're a dinosaur. And I think that
yeah.
was one of his greatest gifts is the ability to recognize when things need to change. And I think
Mhm.
that's a really good lesson for every athlete. Like you might be doing something that's working for you now, but don't be afraid of changing things up and doing things a little bit differently, whether it's training, nutrition, and whatnot, because there's always room for improvement, in
The,
everything we do.
the greatest athletes in any sport, and if whether it's Serena Williams, Simone Biles, Michael Jordan's, LeBron James, Ronaldo's, the greatest athletes in this sport, whether it's the Danielas, the Yans, etc., the greatest athletes that I ever got to coach, the common trait amongst all of them that were most successful in an enduring way was really a couple of main things. Number one, a continual passion of growth and improvement and high coachability,
Yeah.
really valuing that sounding board because it's very, very hard when you're in the weeds to really be able to retain perspective. You can't see yourself doing the doing. And so these folks that we talk about and all of the most successful athletes that I coach were all highly, highly coachable. They really built around coachability and they had this passion for evolution, growth. How can I get better? A real desire for personal development, not just outcomes, not just chasing world titles or Olympic Games or anything like that.
And they had, as you alluded to before, though, they had an amazing base to work from. They
Yep.
did the basics, or they do the basics extremely well, and it's with that they then leverage on the additions. But again, it comes back full circle to just do the basics really well. Like most people don't do, like I get asked, ketones always raise
Mm.
their head with me. I'm like, okay, yeah, if you're doing X, Y, Z, blah, 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 you're doing everything absolutely. Okay, then we can think about, and everyone they're like, yeah, okay, I don't think I need ketones at this point.
Recently I was invited on a podcast with two of my former athletes that I coached throughout their journey, two of your fellow countrymen, Sam Appleton, who you know,
Yep.
and Tim Reed.
Yep.
And it was
I know Reed.
interesting to go back because we got to, Tim won the 70.3 World Championships under my guidance, and it was really interesting. It's worth going to find it out. It's their podcast that they do together. And me as the coach, I have my memory of what that journey was like, but Tim retelling the story of his 2016. That year, he raced, I think, 7 times. He won 6, including the World Championships, and was second in another. And the driving message on this is how I helped him was actually removing distraction and removing clutter. The reason he was so successful through his words, and it's how I recollect it, luckily, is actually nailing the basics. That's where we really started it, and removing distractions and saying, I am just going to master this. I'm going to sleep well. I'm going to fuel a ton. I'm going to make sure I go really easy in the easy days. I'm going to do strength year round. And it built consistency. And it's less cognitive load. And that was an athlete who has a natural tendency to overcomplicate things, who would be thinking about latex tubes and ketones and everything else. We removed all that stuff and he got faster. It wasn't what we added, it was what we removed. And I think that's a really key. That's for a world title. And it ain't easy to beat Sebastian Kienle in his prime. And let alone everyone else was there. And it was because of what we removed. And even his race strategy was about decision making. And we laughed about this in the conversation. But his race strategy ultimately ended up being make smart decisions and go have fun. And the reason for that, it sounds like it's nothing, but I knew what he needed to do, and I knew that he had a good tactical brain. And I wanted to set that free, and it just so happened he had one of those days. He was physically good, and every decision he made across the day, He happened to make the right one, and that's how it works.
Well, I think, look, I know we haven't touched specifically on the evolution of fueling through swimming, biking, and running, which we will do at another time. But I think what you just said is a beautiful way to actually finish this show, because I think if athletes can focus on a sound foundation, remove the distractions, and remember to have fun. Have fun with eating, have fun with training, have fun with your friends. Like, ultimately, that's what this is about, isn't it? It's like,
ultimately, you're going to be all
not
right.
everyone's going to be world champion. Unfortunately, there's only one world champion in every age division. We're all maybe striving for it. We all have dreams, and dreaming is really important. I think having the big dreams, whether you get those dreams or not, and just having some sort of focus there, great. But don't forget why you're doing it.
Yeah.
Like, you're doing it for health. You're doing it for some performance. You're doing it for enjoyment. And if you are losing that enjoyment, or you're not actually enjoying what you're doing, then take a step back and think, why? Is it because, as you said, maybe back to, are you under fueling? And is that why you're a miserable git every day, because you actually just aren't getting the fuel? Is it because you're doing too much training? And that needs to be addressed. Is it just that you just don't enjoy the sport anymore for various reasons? Like, just step back and just look at it from a different angle and say, okay, well, I got into the sport, whether it's triathlon, marathon running, cycling, whatever, you got into it for a certain reason. And just remember why you got into it in the first place, and then try and find that again.
I agree. But by the way, thank you very much, because I haven't heard anyone use git in a sentence since I've been about 14, and so it brought back all of my childhood memories.
The British and Irish lines are here. I'm hearing it. I'm hearing it a lot at the moment. So there's a lot of English and people from the UK here. So,
all right,
Matty, mate, awesome to catch up. We will go more into depth about the the historical alterations in fueling, I think, across the ages. And but look, mate, thoroughly enjoyable today. Love catching up with you, and thank you for everything you do with all your athletes and our athletes. It's a pleasure to be in partnership.
Much appreciate it, and thank you very much for having me on the show, and best of luck to everyone listening for the rest of their seasons and their seasons upcoming down south.
Thanks, Matty. Chat to you soon.
Mate. Bye.